right, folks, this is Abel James, and welcome to the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Today's interview is with an awesome guy and a very sharp trainer named Roger Dickerman, who many of you may know as one half of the duo Relentless Roger and the Caveman Doctor. But before we get to the show, I have a very quick but exciting announcement. A lot of you guys have been asking me to put the show on CD so that you can give it away as gifts or listen to it in the car or do whatever else you might do with CD. So I finally ventured into the physical world of hard copy CDs. I'm working with a small scale printer out of New York. I'm very pleased to announce that you can now order the best of the Fat Burning Man Show on CD and episodes with Mark Sisson, Rob Wolf, Dr. William Davis, and tons more. So if you're interested in that, you can hop on over to fatburningman.com and check out the episodes on the right sidebar at the top, or you can go to the Books and More tab and it'll be right there too. But very exciting stuff. Actually, my own parents hadn't even really listened to the show until I gave them a bunch of CDs of it, just because they don't know what a podcast is. So if you folks are in a similar situation or you know anyone else who might be interested, then hop on over to fatburningman.com. All right, so today we're here with Mr. Roger Dickerman of Relentless Fitness, and I've had the pleasure of hanging out with Roger both at Paleo FX and AHS 12, and I'm always impressed with his innovative thinking, passion for spreading the message of health, and general good-naturedness. This quote from one of Roger's clients sums it up well. A session with Roger is more than just a workout, it's a life lesson. I come away from every session with more tools to live healthfully and make good choices. So as you listen to this show, I'm confident you'll feel the same way. So today we cover why your iPhone is making you fat, why the word paleo is problematic, how stevia ruined Abel's cup of coffee, and why you shouldn't check your email in the morning. All right, let's go on to the show. All right, folks, today we're here with one half of the Relentless Roger and the Caveman Doctor show, Mr. Roger Dickerman. What's cooking?
Hey, Abel, how are you, man?
Life is good. So let's start with your story, because I didn't realize this until I was hopping around on your website, but we actually both sat behind a desk for a time and didn't really enjoy the lifestyle. So you actually started out in finance and bonds, is that right?
That's exactly right. So I definitely thought that my life, my entire future revolved around Wall Street and finance and that lifestyle. And, for a little while, I was pretty stoked up about it. And then, I just became, like you, dissatisfied. And congratulations, by the way, on leaving your own desk job.
Thanks. It feels good.
But yeah, it just became about self-empowerment. And I think I like to say one fine day, but really it was probably a process that evolved over time. I went from being dissatisfied and not necessarily feeling empowered to change it to all of a sudden getting empowered step by step, and then one day walking away.
How did that happen for you, and what would you recommend to folks who are stuck behind a desk, maybe listening to this show right now, and don't really know how to get out of it because they're tethered to this desk working this job and it seems like there's kind of no way out whether they like it or not?
Yeah, for me it came down to a sense of adventure, and I have these two really random and funny literary references. I read two books, and the one book was The Count of Monte Cristo. So that was, it's
no way.
An adventure story. And the other was Tim Ferriss's A 4-Hour Workweek. Mm-hmm. And so I had the fun and the business, and all of a sudden my eyes were open to things that maybe they wouldn't have been before. So I would say, keep an open mind, realize that you're not obligated to do anything, that you really can, if you have a passion, follow it.
I love that.
I guess that's a tagline, right? I mean, we're talking a lot about passion these days, and passion sometimes does need to be practical, but that you should at least at a minimum poke around and see what other possibilities are out there.
Totally. So did you kind of become interested in fitness and nutrition, or has that always been a passion for you?
So Abel, I started really unorthodox for a personal trainer. I grew up and I had a busy family, a mom who was an ER doctor, and there were no home-cooked meals, and there was lots of junk food and TV dinners. Yeah. And, I grew up slightly chubby and very academically oriented. And it wasn't until college when I moved into the city of Philadelphia, and a friend of mine gave me a weightlifting education in a sweltering Chinatown 4th floor apartment. And so for about a year, I just I lifted my head off. I read everything I could get my hands on. And from there, I guess I developed a passion for self-education.
Wow. And so what did you learn?
Oh, I learned that you could change how you looked.
Yeah.
You know, it was when I was a kid, I wasn't inactive. I don't want to give that impression. I played lots of sports within my neighborhood, but
Hmm.
it was, oh, you know, I'm slightly chubby, and that's just the way it is.
Right.
There was no, again, back to that theme, sense of empowerment. There was no, I can take control of this. I can change the food I eat. I can change the way I move. And all of a sudden, my eyes became more and more open to those possibilities.
And that's such a really, it's an important point for a lot of people to understand, because so many just assume that they're sentenced to being a certain way because of age or genetics or the personal situation. But it's incredible the changes that you can make if you put your mind to it more than anything else.
Oh, it's spot on. And genetics, you know, may give you a range of possibilities. It may box you in from, maybe you're not going to become the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, but it does give you a fairly wide range, and certainly, you know, a lot of rope to optimize.
Hmm. And another important point is that some people just assume that it's easy for people like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And who knows, he might be that one in a million rare exception where that is kind of the case. But I would venture to say it's not. He knows, or he knew what he was doing, how he was eating, how he was training. It's a science. It's a very strong commitment, and it's not something that you don't just become Mr. Olympia, right? It's not. You're not born
no doubt
that way.
I'm not sure if you've seen it, but there's a film short that just came out called Arnold's Blueprint.
Oh, really?
And it's all about how he basically cut his chops on an army base, and how he would go marching and doing all sorts of stuff, and then he'd lift for 3 hours a day in the context of army training.
Wow.
So there's no doubt he worked for it.
That's very cool. Yeah. Now, one of the things that you focus on, though, is especially understanding life behind a desk, is you focus on non-athletes. So if someone has a family and commitments and a full-time job, how do you get them started on a responsible exercise regime?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, and that is the bulk of my focus. Granted, you know, if an athlete comes my way, I'm more than excited to take that on and to really dig into the planning behind that. But I do see a lot of people who are part of the corporate world, have families, you know, maybe have been up and down on and off dietary and workout regimens. So what I do is I sit down and first figure out what makes them tick. First figure out why they're there. And then I really try to set them up to succeed and not to fail. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of what we see on TV and the airwaves today centers around very aggressive workout regimens, like right. the P90Xs and the Insanities. And a lot of those are good for certain people, but maybe not for others. You know, someone might go on for 4, 5, 6 weeks and then just completely burn out because in the context of their life, they're trying to work out 5, 6, 7 times a week. So I think I like to sit down with people, maybe reframe their expectations on what they can do with a little less output that can comfortably fit within their life.
And using exercise as a stimulus. I've heard you talk about that on your podcast.
Man, Abel, that's one of my favorite topics these days.
Yeah, go for it. Let's riff on that.
I get a lot of people who sit down across the desk from me in our opening consultations, and they talk to me about, you know, calorie tracking on the treadmills and doing more. And I try and say, hey, you know, sometimes more can be less. Mm-hmm. Instead of thinking about what you're doing during the workout itself. In other words, taking a 20 minutes and making it 30 and then 40 and then an hour plus, and that's got to be better, right? Mm-hmm. But then we reframe that and we say, well, what if we treated exercise as a stimulus? That it's not about what happens during, it's about what you stimulate afterwards. So that if you jog for an hour, maybe you're quote unquote stimulating being a little slower, mm-hmm. and your body shucking off both fat and muscle. Maybe if you sprinted for even 15 to 20 minutes optimally, maybe you're stimulating, you know, muscle growth or at least muscle sustenance and just great composition overall.
Right. I've repeated this story over and over again, but I still use it as an example just because it happened to me, and I showed people with pictures and with measurements what happened to my body composition. And Roger, we've met. I usually am between like 160, 170. That's kind of like my healthy weight, and I'm just naturally kind of like a more solid body composition, definitely a mesomorph and muscles and stuff. But when I was running marathons, I was doing anywhere between 30 and 50 miles a week when I was doing that. I was down to 148, and I actually had a higher body composition. And so you'd assume, like, so many people are just like, well, I need to burn off my belly fat. I had more belly fat when I was running marathons than what I do now, which is barely running at all. I just got back from some sprints where I do, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. I do that for 5 minutes. And for me, that seems to work really well. But it'll get you. It's really intense. And
so you're doing the true Tabatas then?
Yeah. Yeah. But you kind of have to work up to that, right? And a lot of time, you know what it's like to be busy. So you want to get the most bang for your buck out of the exercise, and strapping yourself to a treadmill for 3 hours is not bang for your buck.
No, there's no doubt about it. And, I talk to people a lot about going to sprint school, as I call it. It doesn't happen overnight. So many people are conditioned to go for duration and not intensity. And swapping those variables out is not an easy thing. So sometimes I'll program a sprint workout for somebody, and I'll have them go do it. And they'll come back to me and say, Roger, it was too easy. And I'll say, well, let's talk about it a little bit. Tell me exactly how you approached it. And it really becomes getting them more comfortable with being more intense within a short time frame.
Right.
Just think about your own workout, those Tabata intervals, the 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off. If you approach the 20 seconds on at 50, 60, 70% of your capacity, you wouldn't get too much out of it.
Yep.
You really have to work it up between that 90 and 100% marker.
Now, how do you get people started then? If they've never actually done it before, which a lot of people haven't, or they haven't done it since they, played baseball in 7th grade or something like that. How do you get them started in a way that also prevents injury?
Yeah, and it really is. It's taking it slow. I think of it as I'm being paid to take the long view and sort of fight against their short view. Yeah. And when we sit down across the desk, I'll talk them through that and just say, please give me, let's say, 4 weeks of faith.
Yeah.
That if you just have some faith in yourself, have some faith in me in the program for 4 weeks, and let's see how we come out the other side.
Yeah.
I don't want you to think about things a week from now. Give me 4 weeks. And I think that a week in, they're maybe second guessing themselves. They're thinking, hey, Roger's bringing me along really slowly. I'm used to getting slammed. I'm used to doing that P90X workout and just dripping sweat and lying on my back on the floor, or doing that hour and 10-minute run. And I'm just coming at it from left field. But again, by the end of those 4 weeks, if they stuck with it, some pretty awesome things are happening.
Yeah, it's so funny. I'm just thinking about what you said. The sprints are too easy, because that's definitely something's wrong if they're feeling that way. Because you can actually, I was just talking with Keith Norris, and with his wife, Michelle, we were talking about a 15-minute workout. That's all she had. And she's like, whatever, I can't do it in 15 minutes. He's like, I'll get you in 15 minutes. And she couldn't walk afterwards.
I have no doubt that Keith has the capabilities to maybe even a 10-minute workout.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a pretty intense dude. Now, how do you combine that? Because I want to be clear about this. We're not saying that you should give up on exercise or give up on going on the treadmill even, because any activity is better than none. And so how do you reconcile that with doing the shorter amounts of intense exercise, but also keeping a higher level of activity for busy people?
No, there's no doubt about it. So I take a 5-pronged approach. So when I sit down with somebody, I start by explaining what I conceptualize as the fundamentals of exercise. I look at it with 5 words: sprint, fun, lift, walk, and rest. And if I was programming for, let's say, your average person in your average situation, I would probably program in some level of each of these 5 components. So sprint, we've talked about. I think lift is pretty clear as well. That's, progressively getting stronger. Fun is the interesting one, and that's it has some similarities to, let's say, your CrossFit workout of the day or Keith Norris's high-intensity interval resistance training. And it basically is a merger of sprinting and lifting. And it's not, sprints could be 10, 15 minutes. Lifting could take about 45 or so. This is right smack in the middle. And it's bringing in that element of getting your heart pumping, as well as that element of putting up some weights. And then the other 2 are walking and resting. And I present a little chart. It's an intensity and time graph, and it shows where each of these things fall on that chart. And I really do like to talk to people about walking and resting, because they're so essential. They're not sexy, but they're very essential. Yeah.
Everyone, they try to skip the boring parts, and those can be the most important, because everything just falls apart if you don't have those.
Exactly.
Another one is sleep and and another one in addition to that is stress. And everyone just tries to skip right over those because that's boring. It's not sexy to say like, hey, get more sleep, or like, watch your stress. They're
no
just like, no, whatever, I'll exercise more. What do you do in that case when someone doesn't take the advice to heart?
It's an interesting question. So I'm actually running a program right now. I work with a local company, and I have 12 individuals from that company. The cool thing about it is it's a largely virtual program. So I'm really stretching myself in the sense that, I mean, I'm sure you can respect, you have an online community.
Right.
I'm sure you can respect it where you don't have too much face-to-face contact, and you lose some of that immediate rapport, and you have to find some other ways to get through.
Right.
And I think one of those ways is numbers and statistics, and having something that they can communicate to you feedback-wise, and that you can then optimize for them. And one neat thing that the company did for these 12 individuals was they purchased Fitbits.
Yeah.
And what I can see, and what I asked each of them to do, is to track their sleep.
Yeah.
And so Fitbit will give you that graph of you tried to go to bed at this time, you actually fell asleep at this time, you woke up and stayed up for 10 minutes at 1:30 a.m. And it'll give you that long line, and it'll show you, how qualitative your sleep is. And what's interesting to me is someone who maybe would have been resistant to improving their sleep, now that they can actually see the numbers on a graph, it creates a much better conversation around it.
That's true. Yeah, and I gotta, after talking with Dan Party, who's a great dude over at Dan's Plan, he convinced me to get myself and my girlfriend also a Fitbit, and it's super cool when you can visualize what your sleep looks like, because otherwise you can just assume that you're sleeping fine. But when you actually see these awakenings pop up, it can be really informative, and you can actually make action items to improve your sleep coming out of that. And you like ask yourself, what was going on at 1:30? Like, were lights flashing, or did I not have my earplugs in, or something like that? Actually, it's kind of funny, when I first used the Fitbit, I can't even remember exactly what happened. I might have put it on wrong, or it wasn't calibrated correctly, but it said that my sleep efficiency was something like 27%, and I only actually slept for like an hour and a half. I'm like, this can't be right. And it wasn't. I just had to tweak something, but it is really informative and super useful.
Yeah, you touched on a great point. My podcast partner in crime, Dr. Champ, he talks about, sometimes we think we're doing better than we actually are. And then once you get down to business and track something, it opens your eyes.
Yeah.
Whether if you're trying to cut down your carbohydrates and, you want to limit it to 100 grams a day or something along those lines, and you actually see that you're at 210 grams a day, and it's
right.
Oh my gosh, maybe I need to work a little bit harder on this. Similarly, like you said with the sleep, maybe you find out it's taking you 47 minutes to fall asleep, and you realize it's because maybe you laid down with your iPad that night and got yourself stimulated, and then it jogs you to ditch it and maybe fall asleep in 10 minutes.
So what do you do yourself, or what do you recommend for technology at night?
None. I used to take I have to be honest, I used to take my iPad right in bed. It's so convenient. You can lie on your back and just read what you want to read. And I would then shut it off and try to go right to sleep. And it doesn't really work that well. So I ditched it in favor of good old fashioned books.
They'll put you right to sleep.
That's right.
I remember one night when I was in high school, and I was running on empty that whole time, trying to do it in 3 years and just beating myself up. And there was one night where I was reading Einstein, I think it was, on my sofa, and I fell asleep at 6:30 p.m., like before dinner. But yeah,
so maybe that's your next program, man. Maybe you have to market something, I'll teach you how to get to sleep faster, and it's an Einstein book.
Yeah, I find that my best time to read is in the morning. But yeah, technology is such a tough one, because I know when I was doing my consulting job, every night I would have to check email at like 10 p.m. That was just kind of like the standard thing that everyone did. And if you didn't check it, then it could be a fire alarm in the morning, So there are some great utilities for that. Like I have one that cuts out the blue light starting at sundown, which is really cool, and it's called Flux, for those of you who haven't tried that out. Are there any other tools that you're aware of, or do you just kind of recommend a blackout after after sundown or at night?
Abel, I hate to be lame, but I just really do recommend going old school here.
Yeah.
I just shut the TV down, live in a loft style apartment. So I just keep all the technology downstairs.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great idea.
Just roll upstairs and shut it down. And I really do. I have a small lamp as opposed to a huge light. That way, if I want to read, it's already starting to dim things out, and it just works very, very well. Those nights that maybe there's an event or I'm out or for some reason I'm watching a movie or TV, those nights I just don't get to sleep, as quickly. It's just clear as day.
And that's a really good point too, of separating yourself from it. I know you can use this both ways. Being a musician, I try to keep my guitar around and out so that when I just walk by, I'll play it. Because that's kind of like a good behavior that you want to encourage. It's the same thing. I keep a pull-up bar up in my house in Austin. So when I go through the doorway, if I'm feeling it, I'll just hop up there and do a few and get my blood pumping. But the opposite thing can happen. I also found that I think it was 3 or 4 computers, laptops, just in every room of the house. And they're like always open. What I did, which really helped me, because you can't shut it off when like you see that it's open, it's always there. You're just like, well, there are a million excuses right now to hop on and check Google for something or check your email or send something funny on Facebook or whatever. Just wasting time. But what I did is I got rid of all those other computers. I bought one Mac laptop and I try to stick to this, but every night around like 7 or 8 p.m. I shut it, and then I just like put it in the other room, and it's not there anymore. Like when it's shut, even compared to when it's open, it has a huge mental effect on me. Like the pull isn't there anymore. I don't want to sit down in front of it.
I love that, and I think it's really concerning to me, at least, the world we live in now, where again, your phones and your computers and everything are so empowered to just have these pieces of communication constantly shuttling in, and you can get in that mindset where if you don't constantly have your email open, you're missing something. And I think at first, when you start to shut it, maybe you can attest to this, maybe that first time you shut the computer, you did feel a very intense pull to it.
Oh yeah.
I need to pop it back open. What if I'm missing something?
Right.
But if you train yourself to do that each night, all of a sudden you realize the world will go on without you, and you will get better sleep, and you will stress manage better. And I think it's a really productive experience.
Yeah, it can be scary to think that the world can go on without you, but it's also
true.
There's a great deal of freedom in that too. One of the things that my friends hate me for is I don't really answer my phone because I don't usually have it on me, and that's something that really has helped. When we grew up, and when a lot of other people grew up as well, I'm sure, who are listening, we didn't have cell phones next to our bedside table and on our person all day long. And there's something to carrying around where you could reach anyone or anyone could reach you at any given moment. That is, it's great in one way, but it's terrible in most ways, I would say, with very few exceptions.
My partner Marissa and I, when we go on vacation, we will have a one turn on a day rule with phones.
Oh, that's great.
So we'll turn it on. We'll keep it to 15 minutes or less. Because we run a business, so we do have to be in tune with that. But we have great people at Relentless, so we know things are being taken care of. We'll turn it on. We'll check in. If anything's, if we need to handle anything, we'll do so, and we'll turn it off and get right back to enjoying, wherever we are.
Yeah. One of the things that I try to get people to do is ask themselves if they really need to be on call 24/7, because most people, are essentially acting that way. When you have something that's on and you're reachable 24/7, you're on call at any given moment. You don't know if something's going to pop up and you need to be on the ready to respond to it. But there's a big difference between being responsible in your work or your personal life, where I think that's a great idea if you're on vacation, or even if you're not, 1 or 2 times a day, maybe midday or at the end of the day, checking your messages and checking your email and responding to it, as opposed to one of the things I very much dislike are those notifications that pop up when I get email or something like that. I try to turn all of those off. And so then it's like, it's on your terms, right? You can approach this when you're ready to. And one of the things that I started doing is not checking my email in the morning, because when I do, it just pretty much I'm on defense for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it really throws it in your face right when you wake up if you do that. And just to piggyback on that, one of the first things I did with my iPhone was, like you, to disable my instant email notifications, so that if I wanted to check it, I'd actually have to click the email button.
Yeah, I even put I have an iPhone also, and I put my inbox on the second screen so I don't see it.
That's a great tip, actually. That's a good one.
Yeah, it helps. You have to kind of, these days with so much technology, you kind of have to play tricks on yourself like that. You know, if you find that you're constantly doing something that you don't like it's very bizarre for the amount of time that people spend on Facebook and the internet and in general. Like, it doesn't seem like it's all that fulfilling. It doesn't seem like people are actually happy doing it. It's just kind of like this little addiction that they have.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I do tell my clients, I love to use this. I actually read it via Nate Green. I don't know if you're familiar with that personality online. He's heavily into lifting and those kinds of things. But he had written an article a while back that suggested replacing the word time for the word life. So, you know, if you have the time and the life for checking your Facebook and being on your iPhone and you know, watching mindless shows on TV and this kind of stuff, but you're telling me that you don't have the time or the life for eating right or exercising, does that make any sense at all?
Right.
So, you know, I'll say, hey, just at least come at me honestly. If you have the life for, you know, watching Jersey Shore and checking your email every 10 minutes, but you don't have the life for getting those 2 or 3 workouts a week in and eating well, then fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a tough one.
It is.
So for the busy people out there, the 2 to 3 workouts, what do you recommend that people do? Is there a quick workout that you can just kind of recommend over this podcast that people can get started with right away?
Yeah. So if I were to say, all right, you're going to condense your whole life down to, let's say, 2 workouts a week, they really do fall into that, as I presented, that fun camp, that CrossFit workout of the day-esque or high intensity interval resistance training. So fun for me is freeform, unique, and nonstop. The workout is randomized and constantly changing. It's challenging different aspects of your body. It's kept pretty contained into about a 20-minute time frame. And Abel, what I can actually do is I'll give you a link to test out a little fun workout. So give you a little dose of my medicine. So if anyone wants to jump on and just see how they do with this, they can give it a whirl. That's
great. Yeah, that'll be awesome. Now let's take a step back and talk about something else. You have an awesome podcast called Relentless Roger and Caveman Doctor, and I had Dr. Champ on a few weeks back. How did you get into it? Why did you decide to start this show?
Yeah, so in Philadelphia, Marissa and I run a group called Ancestral Health 215, and we do it to, you know, give people a free way to interact and connect with other people who are living this kind of lifestyle. You know, we'll do potlucks and hikes and fun events like that. So Dr. Champ came strolling in one day. He found the group, and we just kind of hit it off. He stayed afterwards. We talked, we chatted, and it was clear that he was someone who was driven in the field and driven to make a difference. And so we just started hanging out periodically, and the natural evolution was one day we kind of, you know, looked at each other and said, let's do something bigger with this. And,
nice.
You know, there it was, Podcast Road.
Yeah. And how's it been going for you?
It's been really, really enjoyable. You know, I guess I've been a trainer now for 5 years with big visions and hopes to help a lot of people. And one of my least favorite constraints is only being able to work with a certain amount of people per day. And what's been really nice about the podcast is we can prep a little bit and we can just have a conversation. You know, two people who are just passionate about what they do and live it on a daily basis. We can just go back and forth, hit record, put it out there, and it's amazing to think that some people have been helped by it. And I hope people continue to be helped by it, because I used to try and blog all the time, and the prep time and the production time was just overwhelming in the context of the training I was doing. So I would always anger myself. I would always put out what I thought was this great blog post, and then it would take me 3 months to get up another post, and I'd be beating myself up for the entire 3 months.
Yeah. But now you're just basically having a conversation about something you're passionate about, and it's this communication that can go out and is going out to thousands and thousands of people. It's super cool.
It's I think we're lucky to have the platform.
Yeah.
It's incredible, the day and age we live in, and the amount of people we can reach and the diversity of people we can reach.
Right. I love that. Podcasts are amazing. And thank you all once again so much for listening. Now, I'm kind of bouncing around, but I want to make sure that we get to some of these really important things. One of the things I really like about your approach, Roger, is how you put starch and fruit in an activity layer, talking about nutrition. So can you explain why that's important and how you came to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually how I stumbled on paleo, as a trainer, I wanted to differentiate myself. And so I created a transformation program, and I've been working it over for about 3+ years now. But the first thing I did was pilot it myself. And so I was going on this program. At the time, it was 12 weeks long. And I said, I want to see how far I can push my body within 12 weeks, just see what happens. And so for the first 8 weeks, I was doing more so your traditional, lifting, a little bit of sprinting, actually a lot of duration as well, duration cardio as well, the stuff that I now really detest for the most part. There are instances for it, but for the most part, I like to keep it out of there. And I was eating your traditional, I wasn't eating necessarily tons of bread, but if you're familiar with Ezekiel bread, I was bringing things like that in. I was bringing your Greek yogurts and decent amounts of honey and those kinds of things in. And then all of a sudden, the last 4 weeks, I think just because of some bodybuilding literature, I said, I'm going to just drop all grains.
Yeah.
And I cut them out. And the last 4 weeks of my 12 outperformed my first 8.
Wow.
And I said, whoa, this is crazy. This is really, really crazy.
Yeah.
And then I started to dig. And I started to see, well, is there terminology for this? Are other people doing this? And the first person I stumbled on was Mark Sisson of Mark's Daily Apple. And I said, oh, wow, this is primal. This is paleo.
Yeah, that's almost exactly what happened with me. It was the old bodybuilding textbooks that I cut out grains, and then I found out that, wow, people are actually doing this.
Yeah, and so as that progressed, as the self-education progressed, and I interacted with more and more personalities in the field, and more clientele who were adopting these principles and getting great results. What you start to see within the paleo world is that fruit and starch is a very personal experience. Out there right now is the whole safe starch debate, which I kind of have to say I really believe for 99% of people that debate is complete overkill, that it shouldn't even come into play at all. I really think that debate is for the last 1% right now. Because a lot of people are more concerned about getting off of sugars and grains and those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for starch and fruit, a very personal experience. I was finding a lot of clients did better with very little. A lot of clients did better with a moderate amount. And a lot of clients who were moving a lot did better with lots of it. And so I really started to frame it. Okay, let's restructure the food pyramid. Here are your categories, but we have this one funny layer that doesn't ever stay in the same place, and it moves as you move. And so the activity layer, starch and fruit. You move more, and you move more intensely, you eat more of it. And on an individual basis, I'll go into exactly how much, but that's the general principle behind it.
I love that. Yeah, and I've been wrestling with that myself, and that's what I always explain to people is that starches are the one thing that does seem to be very individualized. Some people don't handle them well at all. I know myself personally, at least at this stage of my life, when I cut them out too low for too long and I keep my activity up, I'm smoked and I can't really recover. My performance goes down and I feel like crap. So I'm a big fan of sweet potatoes.
I'm the same exact way.
Really?
And the caveman doc would agree as well. I think we're both big sweet potato advocates, especially in the context of, again, your movement, your working out. I think the best time for the body to take them down is post-workout.
Right. So you don't necessarily subscribe to the belief that every gram of glucose that you consume shortens your lifespan.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. And honestly, there's another side to that where I think that line is coming from just a longevity perspective and not speaking necessarily to maximizing the time that you're here.
Right.
So maybe if there is a little bit of truth to that, fine. But I do, and I know a lot of people who want to be strong and vibrant and fit, and not feel drained and feel sharp. And for many, many people, myself included, it sounds like you included, a little bit of starch goes a long way. Yeah,
and that's true. It's a little bit. I'm talking like half a sweet potato or maybe a full sweet potato a few times a week on like a activity day. But one of the things that it does for me too is that it makes me want to work out. Like somehow I feel revved up in a
Yep.
way, and it definitely helps my performance. And then when you eat it afterwards, it's like it is kind of a treat. And when you treat starches that way, then I think that's really a way to have a healthy relationship with it. For me, they're also a trigger food. Tortilla chips, potato chips, especially popcorn with real butter and salt. That stuff will like I start eating it and I don't ever want to stop. So that's another thing to kind of be careful
Oh,
about.
I'll go nuts on that stuff. I can't even have that stuff in the house.
Yeah,
Because I know once I have the first bite, it's pretty much over.
it's pretty rough.
Yeah, exactly.
But
exactly.
sweet potatoes, I found that's the perfect one for me. And I don't even branch out that much when it comes to starches because I just try to keep them down. Oh man,
Yep.
and when I also kept my activity up. I did some pretty hardcore fasting and my carbs super low. I felt awful for
Oh yeah, there's no doubt about it. It really, you just have to be aware of your movement. I know there are those out there who think even in the context of movement, keep your carbs extremely low. I just personally have not. I've tested it. I personally have not found that working for me.
Right. Yeah, I think it does work fine for some people, maybe really well for certain people, but we are all individuals. And there's no advice that will be, perfectly appropriate for everyone, except for, I think, eat real food. I think that
Exactly.
small piece of advice really will help almost anyone. And I never give medical advice. Obviously, I'm not qualified to do so. But I say that pretty much in any case, real food will help someone, despite their condition.
Yeah, real food just wins out. It just does. And I always suggest when things get overwhelming for people, just focus on one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you hear someone say that starch is bad, but you're using starch to replace outright, cake,
Right.
I think starch is very, very good for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
all about use. It's how you're using it as a person. It's like artificial sweeteners. I think we'd both agree that they're not the best thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone was dumping, 5 tablespoons of sugar in their coffee and they switch over to artificial sweetener, I think that's an extremely healthy move.
Right. Or less unhealthy.
That's a great reframe. I like that. Less unhealthy.
So what do you suggest for artificial sweeteners?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of them, but again, in context, they can work. And so I will say, probably stevia above all.
Mm-hmm. I'm actually kind of a fan
okay.
of xylitol as well.
Okay.
Although there's one that works pretty well for us in baking, and Allison does a heck of a lot of that. Actually, she's coming out with a cookbook soon. But xylitol, now it's coming from GMO corn. If you don't watch it, it used to all. It's been used for over 100 years, coming from birch trees, and it's pretty similar to sugar, but in terms of taste and in texture. And I find that stevia, especially when I first started using it, I had a pretty rough cup of coffee because I put like the whole bag in.
Oh,
and
man.
it's like, oh God, this is terrible. This is the worst thing ever. But if you learn how to use stevia in exactly the right amount, it can be pretty awesome. And the health effects are definitely better than the chlorinated pesticides that are found in Equal and saccharins and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
Yes.
There's just no doubt about it.
Stevia is a pretty good one. Now, there was another topic that you sent over to me that I think could be really interesting. The issue with the word paleo. Why don't you tell us about what happened with Jimmy Moore at Paleo FX?
Oh man, I don't think I've ever told him this story.
Oh really?
Maybe he doesn't even remember it, but I think this will be the debut of the story.
Nice.
Not that it matters to many, but so Paleo FX last year was my first opportunity to be on a panel. I was on 3 panels there, and I was pretty stoked about it because that was my goal. My goal is to get this out there, get this message out there. And so the first panel was moderated by Jimmy Moore, and it was a community outreach panel. And he had reached out and said, hey, what does everyone want to talk about? So I sent him a list of maybe 4 or 5 topics. And the first topic on that list was, is paleo a helpful or harmful term? And so then the panels are getting closer. I see the schedule. I see it's the first panel of the first day, and I'm sitting next to Rob Wolf, and he's the author of the Paleo Solution.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple seats down is Neely Quinn, Paleo Plan. And I'm at Paleo FX, and I just thought, in the scheme of things, with panel debuts, maybe I don't want to go down that road right away. And so I reached out to, I pulled Jimmy aside, and I said, hey, you can just skip over that topic and move on. And I think he was so focused on just the panel itself. I don't even know if he heard me.
Yeah.
And so, of course, first question thrown at me, I understand you think the term paleo may be harmful. Explain. So, and off we went.
So what did you say?
Yeah, I love that this community that we're a part of has really coalesced around paleo. And I think it's amazing. It's an amazing construct in that regard. But I think I have a little bit of a different perspective because, operating out of Relentless Fitness and just interacting with so many different and diverse people that walk in the door, 99% of them don't give a hoot about paleo.
Yeah.
And a large percentage of them don't even want to. That maybe they see it as that silly caveman fad that's been badmouthed by the mainstream.
Right.
And
which it definitely has.
There are these preconditioned beliefs. And if I try to attack those beliefs on day one, or counter those beliefs on day one and say, hey, paleo is the greatest thing since sliced bread, they're going to run screaming.
Yeah.
And so some of my favorite cases are the people who come in and I can tell right away, if I bring up the word paleo, they're going to tune me out from here forward.
Yeah.
And so we start slowly. And instead of saying paleo, we say, hey, grains might not be as healthy as we once thought. And we start to have the grain consumption and then approach sugar. And then maybe later we tackle beans and legumes. All of a sudden, 2 years later, that very same person who would have ran away from me kicking and screaming is now actually a paleo evangelist.
Yeah.
That to their entire peer circle, their family, coworkers, everybody, they are saying paleo really is the best thing since sliced bread. And that is really, really satisfying to me because I remember when they first came in and how they would have approached it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. But you don't have to live like a caveman to eat like one.
Exactly. And so I struggle because I see the debate. In one sense, paleo is such an amazing term because it's created and spawned this community around it. And the community is a really strong one and a really passionate one, and I'm proud to be a part of it. But on the other side of it, if we take ourselves out of the podcast and paleo bubble for a moment, there are 99% of the people out there who just, again, don't have a clue about paleo, and a lot of them don't want to have a clue right now.
Right. Yeah, actually, I just saw something that was forwarded to me that Mark Sisson is on like the nightly news with Brian Williams, I think, tonight, which is pretty exciting stuff. We're starting to poke into the mainstream.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is very exciting.
Hopefully the mainstream sort of starts accurately representing things because I think paleo has a lot of different definitions in the mainstream right now.
Yeah, and within the community.
That you know what, you're right. But I think the whole carbs aren't allowed thing scares people off.
Yeah.
But I think Mark Sisson does a great job because he has a little bit more of a lax approach, and it's a productive one. And I think a lot of people are. I actually do find that people are a little bit more likely to jump on board with Primal, where a little bit of cheese is in there and starches and he's not saying cut your fruit down drastically or anything like that. I think a lot of people are more likely to jump on board with that as opposed to if they run into a hardcore paleo advocate who's saying no starch, drastically limit your fruit, no cheese, no all
no
these
fun.
no's.
Yeah, no fun at all. Well, we're coming up on time, but before we go, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're working on now and anything else you'd like to cover?
Thanks, man. Yeah, well, first, I just want to say that my partner Marissa is a huge fan of this show, and she told me that if I made it on the Abel James show, then I've made it in general.
That is so sweet.
So
she's a sweetheart.
I feel like it's all downhill from here, man. I've peaked.
That's hilarious. Well, thank you, Roger and Marissa.
But no, what I'm working on right now is, day to day, it's all about Relentless Fitness for me. That's our studio. That's kind of our baby, and we interact with lots and lots of amazing people. And in the context of that, there is the Relentless Transformation. That's my pet program, and run it for over 3 years now. Had about almost 150 individuals come through the doors.
Very cool.
In that intensive program. And
wow.
One of the things I'm working on right now is a pilot with those 12 virtual transformers. So I'm really excited to bring the transformation to the online space.
Wow. Very cool, man.
Just see how that goes.
Yeah. Well, you're a busy dude, so I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. And I would love to have you back. You're a pro.
Thanks, man. I'd love to be back. You do things well. You run it's very easy to have a conversation with you, and I appreciate that.
Right on. Well, thanks so much, Roger. We'll be talking soon.
Take care, Abel.
To hear more from Roger, make sure to check out his blog at relentlessroger.com. And once again, I've just released the Best of the Fat Burning Man show on CD, so if you'd like to check that out, head on over to fatburningman.com, and it's on the right sidebar or the Books and More tab. So until next week, enjoy this beautiful fall weather, and I'll be talking to you all soon. Cheers.